Hello, welcome back to an episode of Wendy the Concierge. You can hit me up down below. My email, wendytheconcierge@gmail.com. I'm coming at you today because, well, first of all, I've been missing for a little bit, in case you hadn't noticed. If you look around at my setting right now, you can kind of see that I've been busy moving. I have a new location now, so it took me a little bit to get set up and into a position where I could actually talk to you and give you information again. But now here I am. It is swampy hot in Connecticut today, so I'm taking the time to sit under my fans and relax and tell you a little bit about things. So, I was thinking last night, I was talking to a colleague of mine that I was actually at Danbury with, and I was thinking about how when we were there and COVID started and we were being locked down, and we were all stuck in the dorms all day, there were multiple times that they tried to serve us peanut butter sandwiches or peanut butter and apples, something like that for lunch, which, I mean, that sounds kind of reasonable considering that we weren't allowed to work in the kitchen and, so they had no staffing, so they had to put something quick and simple together to feed us bag lunches. Except for that, the fact is, the colleague in question that I was speaking about is deathly allergic to peanut butter. So she's trapped in this 20 by 40 foot room, and everybody's got one of those little, cups, single serving cups of peanut butter in their hand, and we're all opening them because we're hungry and we want to eat peanut butter, and she's not allowed to go anywhere, and so she has to sit there. Of course, obviously she left because she's like, I'm gonna die and you fools don't have an EpiPen, I'm bouncing, but that happened every day, 4 or 5 times a week for the first few weeks that we were all locked down. And a lot of times they didn't even bring her a different meal. Is it really that difficult? And this was a documented, allergy with history. This wasn't just like, she was like, oh, by the way, I'm allergic to peanut butter. She had medical records and stuff proving this. And yet they couldn't have the competency to put it together. Now, I want you to think about that. And then think about maybe why it is that some inmates aren't trusting the BOP to administer the correct vaccine correctly, to store it correctly, to give it to them in the right time frame, the right way, the right temperature, etc. I mean, you can kind of understand where maybe a little bit of this apprehension comes from. I know many people who have said, oh, I would love to get the vaccine, but the hell if I'm going to let them do it to me in here. They're probably going to inject me with formaldehyde. People are scared. They don't trust not just the BOP, but pretty much any prison staff. And that's largely, a lot of those problems are due to understaffing issues. They don't have, the amount of staffing that they actually need to pay attention and do their jobs correctly. It's not like people are sitting there saying, how can we kill inmates today? Let's have a little bit of good faith here. I met plenty of people who were nothing like that. Of course there were a few sadists, but that wasn't even close to the majority of people. They were rare, okay? Alright, but as we were talking about that, and I was thinking back to those dark COVID times, when COVID first started, I was remembering how, first we had COVID in prison. Then we focused on the lawsuit to help us get more people out of prison. So then we focused on getting those people out of prison and getting, Danbury to actually comply with the lawsuit. Okay. Then we were focused on, being out of prison. Now we're focused on staying out of prison. But in that, I've never really gone back and talked about the total trauma, really, that we went through when COVID first hit in the prison. And I want to tell you a little bit about that today, because I realized I've never actually told anybody about what that was like. Okay? So, we first started hearing about COVID on TV. We had access to television, of course. We watched CNN all the time. A lot of us were very well educated, and so we liked reading newspapers. We liked seeing TV. We had several health professionals in there with us. We had at least 2 doctors, a physician's assistant, several nurses, a chiropractor. Um, you know, we had somebody who had an epidemiology background, actually. So we started seeing coronavirus on the news. People were like, what do you think is going to happen with that? What happens if it gets in here, And this was before it really was hitting in the U.S. This was when it was still just kind of something that we kind of lightly heard of, and then maybe a few people caught when they were on a boat in China or something, like, we didn't really hear a lot about it on this side of the pond. So my thought when I heard about it, I was like, oh, this is just going to be like H1N1, where everybody freaks out, goes and gets a vaccine, and then it's fine. And then everybody says, oh, see, all that panic for nothing. When the fact is, if we hadn't all gone and gotten a vaccine, it probably would have been a very big something. So I was thinking absolutely nothing was going to come of this. It wasn't going to be a big deal. I don't remember precisely when I realized that I was very wrong about that. It was probably February that I started realizing that something is very wrong here, and that this has potential to get really ugly really fast. We started noticing that staff and guards weren't coming in. We started noticing there was one instance where our unit manager was suddenly mysteriously missing, and guys in hazmat suits went into her office and were cleaning everything. She'd been having a town hall with us a few days earlier, had been taking people in and out of her office, and we were all looking at each other like, is this happening? Yeah, it was happening. What was very unnerving, though, is we would ask other staff, oh, does our unit manager have COVID? Oh, I don't know about that. What do you mean you don't know about that? There's guys in hazmat suits going in her fucking office, like, spraying it down with bleach. What do you think she has? Like, come on here. Like, and that was very aggravating to have information withheld like that. It was troubling, very frustrating. At some point we started noticing that our COs weren't coming to work as often. Some of them we weren't seeing for a week or two. We started hearing stories from our COs about what life was like down in the men's facility, or at the women's low facility that's across the street from the camp. We still didn't have COVID in the camp. We were maniacally cleaning everything all the time. We had an absolutely wonderful, wonderful, wonderful counselor who worked at the camp. And she was ruthless in making sure that we had everything that we needed to keep ourselves, clean and as safe as possible within the parameters that the BOP gives us. And that's not very easy, considering that on a technicality, we're not allowed to have things like alcohol, like rubbing alcohol or bleach. At the end of the day, thankfully, decency won over, and people said, people are trying to clean here. We can't be having these women getting sick, because if we all start getting sick, then we're going to make them sick too, So, one of them might bring it in, and if we're not cleaning up, then we're going to spread it to all the staff too, because they've got to come to work with us, right? Right. So we started cleaning everything and, trying to have some sort of sense of control over it. They told us we couldn't go to our outside jobs, because when you're working in camp, you don't just sit in the building all day. A lot of people have this vision of prison that you're sitting, in a 7 by 12 foot cell all day, reading books, let out, to go watch some TV for a bit or lift some weights, and then you go back in your cell. That's not what life is like in a camp at all. Life in a camp is much more like being a boarding school, right? And your dorms are like, imagine a cube farm, like in an office setting, okay? And in each of those cubes, there's a set of bunk beds and 2 lockers, and you and your bunkie live together in this little cube. Okay, it's exactly wide enough to fit a bunk bed in it, barely. And the other wall is where you put the 2 lockers. So there's like 50 people in each dorm. At the time that this all started, there were 167 of us at the camp. So they told us we couldn't do our outside jobs anymore. we couldn't go and do like I used to work construction. We would go down to the staff housing and do repairs. We were the maintenance crew for that. We would do things like paint the benches at the lakefront dock that we had for the lake. It's not for us prisoners. That was for the staff. Like, come on, because some staff members live there. We would do things like paint the parking lots. And there were facilities on the compound as well, like a training facility, a reception hall kind of thing, where they would have like meetings, trainings. Somebody had their wedding reception there, that sort of thing. We would clean up those places, pressure wash them, and do minor repairs on them and such. Clean the gutters, stuff like that. And then eventually we weren't allowed to go out to those jobs anymore. Everybody had to basically stay home. The idea was to keep us home and keep us safe. The first week of March, they told us we could not have visitors anymore. Some people were mad. Others felt that they had let it go on way too long as it was. A lot of people were happy that they didn't have to tell their family, like, no, don't come. The BOP had made that decision for them. Even at that point, though, we weren't realizing really how bad it was. I don't think we really realized how bad it was until the end of March. Most of March, we were confined just to the camp itself, to the building. Okay, we could still go outside and have our normal day and stuff. We just couldn't go to work. And so most of us got other jobs and found other things to do. Like, I started working for the aforementioned counselor, which, okay, a counselor in BOP terms, you think a counselor, you go to them and you talk about your problems. Yeah, no, she wasn't having that. That wasn't what our counselor was for. Our counselor was basically like the logistics person there. She made sure we had enough toilet paper, enough supplies, made sure we had forms and, organized our visitation list and stuff like that. So I started working for her and cleaning and stuff because, again, that gave me some false semblance of control over my situation. At the end of March, they said that we could no longer leave our rooms for all intents and purposes. We couldn't go to the rec rooms anymore. There were no more exercise recreation classes. We couldn't go down to our gym because our gym was in a separate building at the bottom of the hill, by our track. We had to stay in our dorms, and our movements were now controlled according to our dorms, which was ridiculous because we were all in one long building. It was like being in 3 separate classrooms, and the doors opened between them all. And even though technically each dorm had a shower area, it didn't really work like that because the building that Danbury campus in was built in 1982, and there were a lot of problems built when it was built. For one thing, the foundation was not sealed to the building itself when they built it. It has a lot of severe water and mold damage. This shows up in the showers a lot, and they're basically decrepit. The building should be condemned and like burned to the ground and completely started over. I don't understand how humans can even be stored in that building, and I'm really not a picky person. I've lived in lofts and squats, and like it's a hole, really. You can put like some lipstick on the pig to make it look nice when regional comes, but it is a horrendous mess, not fit for human habitation. It's not. I feel very comfortable saying that. So of course nobody wanted to stay there, and then nobody could really take it seriously because, okay, so we're supposed to stay in our little dorms, which are again right next to each other, nothing but a door separating us. But the guards, when they come and count us, like, they're going between all the dorms, when the warden and the assistant wardens come through to make sure that we're all sitting in our proper dorms, and they yell at us for going in between them and not staying in our quarantine or whatever. They're walking between us, and they're not even wearing masks at this point. And we're like, who are you kidding? You're just making it look like this. Like, this is a dog and pony show. This isn't preventing anything. Well, then we got to a point where we were missing a lot of staff. We started seeing people come up to be our guards because, okay, this is the other thing about a camp. Okay, these are the epitome of like people that you're wondering what the hell they're even doing in a prison. We only ever have one guard watching us after 4 p.m. and like they're really just there in case we need something, like, can you lock the beauty salon, can you open the chapel, like, and then they count us at 9 o'clock and that's it. That's all. So we started seeing people come up to watch us, especially on the weekends and at night, who we'd never seen before, and it was clear that they were not officers. They were like administrative staff, business people. They were wearing civilian street clothes, and if they ever were COs, they hadn't been for probably a decade or more. Like, they were just very like, hi, okay, when do you eat? Okay, when do you have phone time? Like, and so what they did, since we were all in our different dorms, one dorm was supposed to come out for phone time, one comes out to use the computer, and we would rotate all night like that. And it was just ridiculous. We had like a spray that we sprayed the phones between uses or whatever, and the lines were so long and people were irritated and grouchy, and everybody, of course, wanted to talk to their family members. And, you can't blame them. So, around the first week of April, it got really, really, really bad. Like, basically all the officers had COVID and were very, very, very sick. And then we started noticing that things really got crazy. A bunch of people from, I want to say from Grand Prairie, because they were from Texas, we could tell by their accents, and we asked them, they came up to watch us, to staff us. So at this point, I was responsible for the trash, because I can't stand like trash laying around. It just drives me absolutely crazy. And for some reason, nobody wants to take out the frickin' trash in prison. So I would round up the trash every day, and because of my anxiety and insomnia, I was only sleeping in 2-3 hour shifts at a time anyway, so it was a perfect job for me. And what this meant is I would get up around like 5-6 in the morning. I would collect all the trash, and I would take it out, and then I would come back. I would sleep a little more. I'd do it again around noon, and I'd do it again around right before 4 o'clock count. I'd do it again right before bed, So I remember one morning I got up, and I go to the officer station, and there's like 4 or 5 people there, and they're all looking at each other like they're like, oh my God, what are we doing here? Like, I don't even know how to do this. And I'm like, hi, can I take out the trash? Because you have to ask permission. And then what you do is you go and take out the trash, and then you come back and you say, hi, I'm back. And then they say, okay. And then, you go back to your little queue. All right. So I come and I ask if I can take out the trash. And they're like, do you normally do that? I'm like, yeah. And all of a sudden I realized that they're not from here. Like, they don't know what they're doing. And so I explained the process, and they're like, okay, when do you have breakfast? And I'm like, well, around 7:30. Lately, a couple officers usually come, and they call us out by the dorms to the steps, and they hand us each a breakfast. It's either in a sack lunch, or like it's in a styrofoam container or something like that. And they're like, oh, okay, great, thank you. And I'm like, I'm like, oh my God, these poor people. And as I'm walking off, I can hear them, and they're like, and one of them says, they're so mild-mannered. And I'm like, who the fuck did they think they're watching? Like, really? Here, you're in a camp. Like, this is nothing. Like, Martha Stewart went to a camp. What do you think we're gonna be like, right? Okay. So I haul out the trash, and I'm talking to one of my friends, later that day, and I'm like, yeah, they said we were mild-mannered, and she was like, no, that's nothing. I was up in the night when they were counting us at midnight, and they were here, and they couldn't figure out how to count us. And I'm like, what do you mean they couldn't figure out how to count us? 1, 2, 3? It's not that hard, right? She said, no. They came in, and they had their flashlights, and they were like, well, where are they? And there was somebody there explaining, and she didn't know which officer it was, but there was some officer who actually knew what he was doing there explained to them. And they were like, how are we supposed to count them if we can't see them and find them? Because, we're under our blankets, we're all curled up. Like, I've been in facilities where you're not allowed to sleep with a blanket over your head. You have to have it like this. And the lights are on 24/7 so that they can see you and exactly what you're doing all the time. That's a miserable experience. Danbury wasn't like that. It was like pitch black in the middle of the night. It was the most glorious thing ever. The first night I was there, I was so happy. I was making my bed, and I found out that the lights went off at night, and I was all smiles just like this. And there was this other woman there, and she was like, this is your first day here? I was like, oh no, I've been locked up for a year and a half in holding facilities. This is glorious. And she was like, oh, now I understand why. Side note, that's an interesting story. That woman had originally been given a life sentence for crack dealing. She eventually got it knocked down to 19 years. And then the retroactive sentencing went into effect for the crack cocaine disparity. And she walked out free and clear after serving 10. And she left like 2 or 3 weeks after I did. And I had just, begun my sentence when she left. Like, she left 2 or 3 weeks after I had just gotten there. And she told me, she said, don't you ever give up, okay? Like, miracles can happen. Here I am, sitting here. Like, it's a miracle that I was privileged enough to get out. Like, that I was able to have that kind of an opportunity. And she gave me her sheets when she left, because having, like, white sheets was, like, a really, like, fancy thing there, because the ugly brown sheets that they had were just ugly and horrible, so everybody wanted to keep the old school white sheets that they used to have before. So she gave me her white sheets, and they had her name on them, and I slept on those sheets. I mean, I washed them, of course, because, I'm a civilized human being, but I slept on those sheets every night until I left as my good luck charm. They worked. So yeah. So the people were there, and they had a hard time counting us, and then they came and they followed, the officers around as they came and distributed our meals to us for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And keep in mind, you're talking like there's 50 women trapped in a 20 by 40 room with 25 little office cubes, each of us in a cube. 2 to a cube. I mean, people were getting on each other's nerves. I'm amazed there were not more fights. We started taking bets as to who was going to be the first to run off. I was actually kind of amazed that nobody did run off. Like, I wasn't going to run off because I had a lot of time on my back, and I was like, no, I'm not going to run off. I'm going to, like, be a very good girl and hopefully, like, get some sort of credit for being a good girl, right? But no, nobody ran off. Now, if you remember in those early days of COVID, it was really scary. We were seeing pictures on TV of places like looking like a ghost town. People were really sick. There was no vaccine. There was no real treatment. We're just outside of New York City, and we're seeing them set up the Javits Center as this, monster COVID hospital. We see like a whole freaking boat from the U.S. Navy pulled into the harbor in New York, and, to like help people who are not sick with COVID, to give them some sort of hospital space. And, we're seeing how our officers are barely coming in. They're pulling in randos from Grand Prairie to, like, take care of us. And, some of these people had never been officers. Never. Those who had, not for 10, 12 years. Our regular officers were being pulled and put into the men's facility and the women's low across the street, because you can leave with like a receptionist, and we weren't going to do anything. We're a bunch of campers. We're like nothing. Okay, there's no locks on the door, there's no fences, and we're still sitting in the freaking camp. Like, that shows, like, how much of a threat we were, right? At the same time, they were counting us every 3 hours, because I think somebody did run off from Aliceville. And so they were paranoid that we were going to run off. And one of our favorite officers, I'm not sure he was our favorite, but we were his favorites. He always said, I know my campers, they're not going to run off. You don't need to be counting them like every 3 hours. Give us a break, And it was so exasperating because you couldn't do anything. You would finish counting, then you would try to like get into a book or take a nap, and then you had to wake up and get ready for count again. It was a miserable experience. Um, so yeah, they would leave us with just any rando because they could do that, and we weren't seeing them very often. And at one point, I said, I talked to a couple other people who, were pretty experienced in these sort of things, and like I said, listen, we need to have an adult conversation about what we're going to do when it gets here, because it is going to get here, and it's not going to be pretty, especially because there was no way for us to isolate ourselves because of how we lived, remember, in the office cubes. Okay. But I said our first order of business, though, we need to talk about like the possibility, what are we going to do if one day they stop showing up here? I'm a disaster catastrophicizer. I want to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, and G for every worst case disaster scenario. That's what makes me sleep well at night. Like, even just thinking about the whole concept of what if we have to go back? I'm going to tell you right now, deep down in my heart, we ain't going back. I don't believe that. Not in a million years. Okay? But I need to be prepared for it. And I'm fighting because I want official word that we're not going back, right? Right. Okay? Well, I need to have a worst case disaster scenario plan. So I said, listen, we need to talk about what are we going to do if they don't show up. I was like, okay, some people are going to start running off and whatever, that's on them. I'm not going to sit there and play guard. Like, you don't pay me enough for that. Nope. Sorry. But at the same time, we're going to have to do things. We need to like take care of ourselves. We need to make food. We need to have toilet paper, stuff like that. We made plans, like, where do we get this stuff? How do we do? We figured out a plan for, like, how we would manage to take care of ourselves, even though we might be missing keys for a few places here and there, where we're like, oh, no, there's actually a way you can get in there through this door, that door, crawling over through that ceiling tile. We got it. All right, cool. So that made me feel at ease, right? And then we started, having, like, hypothetical scenarios, like, how many days would they have to not show up before it went all Walking Dead around here and we took off? And some people were like, oh, I'm not going to take off. They'll come back eventually, And if we take off, then, like, we'll get in trouble. And I was like, man, you don't show up for a week, I'm going home to Canada. Bye, y'all. See you later, right? But that was my thought. The truth is, I would have stayed there because I just have a sense of duty like that. Like, I would have been like, okay, we need to take care of people. So that was our first disaster scenario that we discussed. And then I went to the epidemiologist, the lady with the epidemiology background. She's back in prison now. It kind of knifes my heart a little bit. So I went to the woman with the epidemiology background, and she was this old lady in her 70s, and she was a fierce, crazy, mean old bat, like if Archie Bunker was a woman, just totally curmudgeonly, brilliant, intense lady. Crazy. Anyway, sorry. I went to her and I said, listen, I know that you can have a real shit conversation. What are we going to do when it comes here? Because if it comes here, we're all going to get it because of how we live together. And I've run the numbers. They're not going to have many ventilators here for any of us. There's 167 of us here. About, 30 of us, 40 of us are going to get really, really, really super sick. And of those, probably about 3 to 8 are going to die. And That seemed like logical numbers based on what I was seeing on TV. I still stand by those numbers that if it had hit when we were at our peak, that's about what would have happened. I was like, but how are we going to take care of people? What are we going to do? How are we going to isolate? So we sat there and talked, and she said, if I was going to make a quarantine room, I would put them in the old visiting room. They've got their own bathroom up there. There's even a shower up there, that we can jerry-rig, and we can keep them up there, bring the food directly from the kitchen, because our old visiting room was on top of the kitchen, and it was separated just by a stairwell. So we could do that, right? Right. Okay. So we thought about that, and she agreed with my numbers. And then I said, we need to talk about something else. She was like, what? I said, who are you worried about? She said, who are you worried about? I said, I've got a list of about 5 to 7 people here that I am genuinely terrified are going to fucking die on us if that comes in here. And she just kind of looked at me because she knew I was thinking of her, because she was the oldest one there, and she was a cancer survivor and had diabetes. She was the technical definition of medical vulnerability. And she was also the kind of woman who would go out and shovel, 2 or 3 feet of snow outside of her door. And if you said, can I help you with that? She would say, fuck off. So, I knew that she was not going to be having me telling her that I was worried about her. And I said, you're one of them. And she was like, yeah, you can stop worrying now. So I said, okay. And one of the other ones that I was worried about was my aforementioned colleague with the peanut butter allergy, because she also happens to have lupus, which is an autoimmune disorder. And, I had seen her struggle with lupus at various points, and she was never the type that was like, oh my God, I'm dying. But, you notice, you see when somebody's normally got this, really beautiful, light coffee color complexion to their face, and then one day they're actually gray, a deep gray. And so she was on my list too. There was another woman who even in the best of times, she needed oxygen to breathe. Regular nebulizer treatments. She had this raspy voice where she always talked like, hi, how are you? And I was like, oh God, those lungs are not going to be able to handle COVID. There were a couple other people who were cancer survivors. There were other people who were deep smokers. Had been smokers for years. There were a couple of people who were morbidly obese. And I don't mean just very round. I mean to the point they had mobility issues kind of thing, And that's something that can easily happen in prison. There was actually one woman that I knew there. She wasn't there at the time COVID went down, but she had actually been a beauty queen back in her day, done beauty pageants. And she was probably 450, 500 pounds by the time she left prison. And one of the health teachers, one of the women who did health education and fitness classes there, told me once, nobody should ever beat themselves up for how they gain or lose weight for that matter in prison, because you cannot eat properly. You can't really hardly control anything. You can't control your routine. You can't get the foods you're used to that you need. You're just given a very slim selection of food, and you've got to make your best of it. And plus, who wants to sit there and give themselves stringent restrictive eating when you're in prison, when one of the few joys that you get is food? It's one of the few control items that you have left, what you put in your own mouth, right? So yeah, so that happens a lot. And then, especially because now we were locked down, we couldn't work, we couldn't go to our jobs, we were sitting in our rooms all day, every day for 3 months. Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I'll use myself. When I got to Danbury, I'd been like in holding facilities, so I wasn't even able to go outside or anything. The exercise I did was fairly mild. I lost a lot of weight when I was immediately in the immediate aftermath of when I was arrested because I was off the drugs and booze, you know. And so I was no longer retaining water and stuff either because some of the drugs I was using were really messing with my cardiovascular system. I actually lost 27 pounds in the first 10 days of my incarceration. Yeah. So that was great. And then when I got to Danbury, I was working construction. I was walking the track all day, every day. I lost 40 pounds in about 6-7 months. I looked fantastic. And then they locked us down. And I gained 30 pounds back in the span of about 3 months. 4 months. There was nothing to do all day but eat, you know? And I have a tremendous sweet tooth. So I would sit there and eat a whole bag of Hershey's Kisses because what else am I going to do, right? Right. You know, and just to have a little pleasure, of course. You know, some of the girls were amazing jailhouse cooks. And they would cook us these, like, rich rice meals with sausage and stuff like that. And all that crap on commissary is filled with sodium and stuff. You know, it's the kind of stuff that's going to make you a chunky monkey. And so a lot of us beefed up. That really worked against us when we went to court. Those of us who went to court, you know, claiming, like, oh, my God, you know, like, I have a BMI of this, let me out. Sometimes the judges would look and say, like, well, you got yourself in that condition. It says here you've gained 40, 50 pounds since you got in. What are you trying to do? Just get out? No, I'm not going to play. There were some people who did. But most of us just gained that much from being locked down, not being able to move for 3 or 4 months. It's pretty awful. So in the camp, we just continued to sit there and wait, and we continued to hear these horror stories from what was going on in the other facilities, at the men's facility and in the women's low across the street. And, you know, we continued to try to keep ourselves clean. We couldn't go out for months and months. Sometime around June, I think, they started letting us go outside again. That was such a relief. And it was even kind of a thing where technically I think we weren't supposed to be outside, but there were a few guards who came and were just like, this is fucking ridiculous. You guys need some fresh air. Go outside. So we would go outside and people were fighting, you know, to get out. And I started to believe for a while that maybe we would get lucky and we wouldn't get COVID in the camp. I started to really believe that. I was really hopeful. We had somebody test positive when we all got tested at the end of May. May 28th, I believe we all got tested. I think it might have been a false positive. Either that or she was maybe one of those asymptomatic people. But she was the only one who tested positive. Everybody lost their minds. It was practically like a buck burning there. We cleaned everything, bleached everything down. We threw away Bibles because people were like passing them back and forth when we would get together and read the book of Psalms every day. What else were we going to do? All we had were, you know, these weak cleaners that the BOP gives us, bleach that people were nice enough to bring in from time to time, and prayer. So people would get together and just pray every day. We would all take a different psalm and we would all say them out loud together for months on end. It was almost like a spell or a chant to keep us safe. You know? So, alright. So, we had that going on, and, I mean, it was really difficult, you know? Like, they started letting us out, and for a bit there, we started thinking that maybe we had, you know, gotten away with it. Hold on a minute. I'm looking up something here. Alright. Yeah, Psalm 69 verse 33. For the Lord heareth the poor, and he despiseth not his prisoners. That's my favorite psalm. Just couldn't remember if it was 6933 or 3369. It's 6933. Okay. So June came, and in June they started really throwing people out because we were doing well in our lawsuit that said that, yeah, they have to actually start letting people out. And they knew it looked good on them to let people out, so they started letting out anybody who was like at 50%. They were just like, get out. And so our numbers went down dramatically. By middle of summer, I think. Yeah. We were down to like, I don't know, 40, 50 people, something like that. And that was nice because it enabled us to spread out where we were each one person to a room, to a cube. So we weren't so up on top of one another. But we still felt like sitting ducks. And we were still fighting with our lawsuit. And we were still fighting to go home. And we were always worried that COVID was going to come back. And then in October, they said, oh, we're going to open visitation again. And I remember thinking, like, what the hell? Are you trying to kill us? You know, like, that's the only reason we've been able to keep it out. I was appalled. I could not believe they were opening visitation. I was not the majority opinion, however. There were a lot of people who were like, no, I want to see somebody's face. And I'm like, what do you care? You're going to be sitting across 6 feet from them with plexiglass between you. You're going to be required to wear a mask the whole time. Get on a freaking video visit. Who cares? You know, because we had video visits in camp. I couldn't understand for the life of me why anybody wanted to see anybody in person with those kind of restrictions. Like, I just don't get the point. I don't at all. It's just stupid. Like, you can't touch. You have to wear masks the whole time, so you can't even see each other's face. There's plexiglass between you. Like, you can't even eat or anything. It's limited to, like, an hour or two, something like that. Like, stupid. Just dumb. Oh, but no, it was going to happen. And exactly as I predicted, within, like, 3-4 weeks at the most, we had full-blown cases of COVID going, and this time we got it in the camp, too. I don't know if it came from visitation or if it came from the kitchen at the men's facility. There's a lot of speculation that that's where it started, because we were sharing kitchen facilities with them at that time. Yeah, they were feeding us a lot of gas station type meals and like to-go meals and stuff, and like we were just eating like utter, complete, and total crap during this time period. It was miserable. And so then we get COVID, and they start taking people out and across, you know, to other places, like to the visitation room and stuff. And we know that they're not taking care of them, that they're basically just locking them in a room with a blanket and saying, like, don't cough on me. Get better soon. And that's pretty much exactly what they did with those people. Scandalous. It just really upsets me that these people were sick and they couldn't even get proper care. You know, they were just treated like they were a piece of rotting garbage, that the only reason they were being moved anywhere was so they didn't infect anybody else. Granted, they needed to be removed, but they should have been cared for. And, you know, anytime it was brought up, they'd be like, oh, like, they're fine, you know, like, we're taking care of them. No, they fucking weren't. They weren't doing anything for those women. They barely took their temperatures, you know? They didn't even give them Tylenol at times. They were constantly late giving them food, even. They jerry-rigged up this freaking, like, portable shower in there, which, I mean, what were they going to do? They have to, you know? Like, you do the best you can in those circumstances. So they jerry-rigged this portable shower up in there that's, like, cold most of the time. You know, these people are sick, they're weak, and they want them to, like, crawl up these steps, and, like, it's slick and slippery, like, and there's cameras in the visiting room, so you gotta get naked on these cameras that, you know, the officers can see you from the station, and it makes people paranoid. It's just a mess. And so then, you know, A lot of us who had been waiting since the beginning got removed during that time because they'd been holding on to us as long as they could because, they want to keep people. They keep saying, like, oh, we don't want to keep people. Yeah, they do. They have a culture and mentality, whether they admit it or not at the BOP, that they will not let you out unless they absolutely have to, unless they're absolutely certain you are absolutely required to be let go. There's no, like, oh, you could be let go and put on this program or that program and go to this halfway house or that facility or this work detail. No. They keep you as long as they absolutely can. I don't even think it's thought out, but that's their mentality about it. So a lot of us at that point were then ordered out by our judge, including yours truly. Knowing that you're kept somewhere and you're just a sitting duck, just waiting for what you've seen on TV and been told is a highly contagious, extremely infectious, very damaging disease that you know that if you do contract this disease, you will not be cared for, is really frightening. It feels like you're at risk of death. Being scared that you're going to watch women that you've grown close to, who've become some of your best friends and allies, who've gone through things with you that nobody should have to go through as part of a prison sentence. Looking at them and wondering, is she gonna live if she gets this here? Worried that you're gonna have to watch your friend die. It was a legitimate fear. And I don't even know how to convey that properly. These are people that you spend every day with, that you share stories with, that you see cry at the end of a visit, that you see have an angry phone call, that you ask, how are you okay? That you make posters for on their birthday, that, you take programming with where you learn about their childhood and maybe you share a little bit about yours too. And you know that they've got people at home who love them, and you know that they committed mortgage fraud, or maybe they falsified student loan applications. These are actual crimes of people that I'm talking about here, okay? And you're thinking, what the hell is this person doing sitting in this prison required to get COVID where they're not going to be cared for? This person has people who love them. This is a good person who's going to go out and have a decent life. This person didn't beat anybody. This person didn't ruin somebody's childhood. This person didn't steal somebody's innocence. This person didn't take, a father from their family. And you know what? Even if maybe they did, why should they be taken from theirs? What did their family do to deserve that? And just seeing the callousness with which some of the staff just did not even care. Or maybe they were burned out. I don't know. But it was so awful to just know that your life was completely out of your control and that there was a very real risk of losing it. And all that stress that we were under, that they were under. I remember one day going out to take the trash, and at this time we were under a major lockdown, which meant that in order for me to take the trash out, an actual officer had to go with me. You have to understand, for a camper, this is totally unheard of. This is like accompanying your 12-year-old child to the bathroom, okay? It's like, no, they're fine, right? We get outside, and I start picking up the bags from the dumpster, and he says, Hexman, where's your gloves? And I'm like, what gloves? He was like, they don't give you gloves? I'm like, no, they don't give us gloves. There's no gloves here. And there weren't gloves there. They're all being used for other purposes. There was a shortage of gloves everywhere. And he just looked at me and he was like, he was so disgusted and horrified by this. Not just like, ew, gross, you're touching garbage cans, garbage bags, but like, he was just like, where's the humanity? And this was a man who had a sister who basically passed away from the effects of opiate addiction, who was not much older than me. Like, he wasn't oblivious to the plight of somebody ending up in prison due to spiraling out from addiction. He knew that we were people and not just monsters. There are some officers who don't understand that the only difference between their side of the desk and ours is timing and opportunity. Thank you, Mr. B. I'm stealing your line. And, like, when they don't understand that, they think that we're monsters. This was one of the good guys who knew damn well we weren't monsters, because he had monsters in his own family. Maybe he had a little monster inside of him himself. Who knows? A lot of them do. We were all just so worn down, beat down, and just completely wore out. I remember when I finally left, and I'm in the car and being driven to where I'm going to be staying, quarantining for the next couple weeks. I'm just looking out the window in wonder, like, oh my God, I'm finally out, I was so happy, and I was on the phone with my daughter because the guy who picked me up let me use his phone so that I could call my people and tell them I really, truly did leave. And, I was so happy, but I got home, it's this beautiful, beautiful home with, like, soft, clean, white cotton sheets and towels everywhere, and one of those beautiful bathtubs you can soak in, and I didn't have my ankle monitor yet, so I could actually take a really long, soaky bath. Thank you, Sarah. And all I could think about were the people that were left, and I was so scared for them, because I managed to get out. And I couldn't believe I had managed to get out without getting sick, because everybody was getting so sick. And I'm so grateful that, people used to think that it was sad that I was always so standoffish and like, no, don't hug me, don't touch me. I was never the huggy, kissy, lovey person. I am mentally. I care about everybody, but I am not the person that's running around hugging everyone just like, ooh, gross. I don't want to touch people. I don't want people touching me. The only people who ever touched me in prison were the women who did my hair. I love you, Krista and Ponce. And you too, Maria. They were the women I trusted enough to touch me. And dear Eva, who did my nails. Touch was a weird thing, Your body, you barely own it when you're in prison. And, you get stripped down so many times and you have to show your body to everybody, and it's just considered a normal thing and stuff, and you just don't have any control of your own self anymore. It's just, no. So I managed to get out and not be sick, but all my friends were sick, and I was scared that one of them would die. I don't know how one didn't, honestly. I'm really shocked that not a single one of them died. Some of them got extremely sick. Some of them had to go to the hospital. One of them was there for almost 2 weeks. Some of them are still having effects from it. Some of them still can't breathe. But they're alive. And the idea that after all that fight, after going through all that, after spending all those weeks and months locked down waiting for just like this tsunami to come and smash all of you out, the idea that after all of that, and we get out and we reestablish our lives in the COVID world, where in some places it's controlled. You know, you can go and wear a mask and just be safe, and it's pretty reasonable. In other places, it's miserable. I have friends in Mississippi right now that I'm scared for them. I hope they didn't get out of prison just to, get sick at home and die. But at least they can access health care if they do. To get out of prison, to go through all of that, all those months of fear and terror, that you're essentially going to be sentenced to death because of a crime you committed that did not carry a death sentence. To then reestablish your life, to make something good of yourself. And then to find out that some pencil-pushing bureaucratic butt monkey at the frickin' OLC decides that, oh yeah, the CARES Act actually says you have to go back, when every legislator has said that that was never their intention. You've got to be kidding me. And everybody says, well, the pandemic's not over yet. We've got time to figure it out. While the BOP is actively pulling people back and telling case managers, because case managers have told us this, that the BOP has told them, violate them on anything. We want as many back as possible. They've got too much time on their sentences. As if like working on my frickin' tan and eating Cheetos and knitting at Danbury is going to do anybody any good in society whatsoever. But hey, if the taxpayers want to pay for me to do that, cool, great. Less stress for me, less bills to pay. I think you and I both know that's not the right way. To find out that after all we've been through, that this would even be an option. You've got to be fucking kidding me. So please, keep them home. Thank you.